There was a conversation I had not too long ago that has stayed with me. A young father had recently gone through a divorce. Like a lot of men in that situation, everything was still fresh. Every conversation with his ex turned into another argument. Every disagreement reopened the same wound. He wasn't sleeping well. His mind kept replaying old conversations, wondering what he could have said differently, what he could have done differently, and whether there was still some way to fix what had already been broken. He asked me for advice. Not legal advice, not advice on how to win in court, just fatherly advice. And I remember thinking that there really wasn't anything I could tell him that would make the pain disappear. There isn't a sentence in the English language that can erase that kind of loss. So, instead, I told him something I think every divorced father eventually has to understand. The mistake, whatever he believed it to be, had already happened. Whether the mistake was choosing the wrong woman, whether the mistake was staying too long, whether the mistake was leaving too soon. It didn't matter. The mistake was behind him now. He could spend the next 10 years replaying every conversation in his mind, trying to figure out exactly where everything fell apart. And even if he found the answer, it wouldn't change where he woke up the next morning. He was still a divorced father. That understanding wasn't surrender. That wasn't saying he was wrong. That wasn't saying she was right. It wasn't saying that what happened was fair. It was simply accepting reality. And I think that's one of the hardest things a man will ever have to do. Because sometimes accepting reality feels like giving up. But it isn't. It is the beginning of strategic thinking. You cannot build a future while you're trying to relive the past. The divorce has already happened. Now, your responsibility is different. Your responsibility is your children. But before you can become the father they need, there's something else you have to do first. You have to grieve. Not forever, not dramatically, but honestly. Because something worthy was lost. Maybe it was the family you believed you were going to have. Maybe it was the future you spent years building in your own imagination. Maybe it was simply the quiet belief that the people sitting around your dinner table would always be there. Whatever it was, it mattered. Don't be afraid to admit that. One of the mistakes I see men make after divorce is convincing themselves that none of the marriage was ever good. I understand why they do it. If they can convince themselves it was all misery, then maybe the loss won't hurt quite as much. But that's rarely true. If it had all been terrible, it wouldn't hurt this much. So grieve what was good. Grieve the vacations, grieve the holidays, grieve the laughter. Grieve the ordinary Tuesday evenings that seemed so forgettable when you were living them. Grieve the life you honestly believed you were going to have. Because those things were real. And pretending they weren't doesn't make you stronger. It only teaches you to lie to yourself. It's okay to remember the good years. Remembering them doesn't mean you have to go back. It doesn't mean you excuse what happened. It doesn't mean you pretend the ending never came. It simply means you're telling yourself the truth. Life is almost never so simple that it's all good or all bad. Most of the things we lose are both. A mature man is capable of holding both truths in his hands at the same time. The marriage could have been worth something and still be over. If you refuse to mourn what was genuinely lost, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to recover it. That's the trap. You'll keep fighting yesterday while your children quietly grow up today. And, at some point, grief has to become acceptance. Not because what happened was right, not because it was fair, not because you stopped believing what you believe, but because strategy always begins with reality. Once you finally accept that, something begins to change. You stop trying to win arguments that no longer matter. You stop trying to force another person to become who you wish they were. You stop measuring every day by whether the other parent finally apologized or finally admitted they were wrong. You begin measuring your days differently. Did I spend time with my children? Did I teach them something worthwhile? Did I build a home where they feel safe? Did I become the kind of man I hope they become someday? Those questions matter. The others don't, not anymore. That doesn't mean the other parent suddenly becomes easy to deal with. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the arguments continue. Sometimes the insults continue. Sometimes they continue trying to rewrite the story in a way that favors them. Yes, they do that. You can't control that. You never could. The only thing you can control is the example your children see when they look at you. That is why I think fathers need something solid to stand on. I think of it like a lighthouse. A lighthouse doesn't chase ships. It doesn't scream at the storm. It doesn't try to command the sea. It simply stands where it was built. Steady, reliable, visible. Some captains can steer by it, some ignore it. The lighthouse doesn't change what it is based on how other people respond. That's your job now. Stand where your children can find you, be consistent, be dependable, lead by example. Not because it guarantees the other parent will change, it probably won't. But because your children are learning something every day. They're learning how adults handle disappointment. They're learning how men carry burdens. They're learning whether strength means becoming bitter or becoming steady. Years from now, your children will make their own decisions. They'll decide which qualities they want to carry into their own lives. You don't make that choice for them. You influence it by the example you set every ordinary day. That's the long game, and it's a hard game. Because it asks you to invest years of your life without demanding immediate results. It asks you to trust that character compounds the same way resentment does. Quietly, one day at a time. I know right now that's difficult. I also know how it works. I've lived long enough to watch it work. Children notice more than we think they do. Not all at once, not when they're young, but over time. They begin to recognize who remained steady, who showed up, who kept building when it would have been easier to keep fighting. In the end, they don't remember every argument. They remember the atmosphere you created, the home you built, the example you lived. That's the inheritance you leave them. Not your explanations, your example. So, if you're a father listening to this, grieve what was lost, honor what was good, learn from what wasn't, accept what cannot be changed. Then, turn your attention back to the people who still need you. Because your children cannot live in yesterday, and neither can you. The future is already arriving, and whether you realize it or not, they're watching how you meet it. Until next time.